Here goes.
Good. Well, welcome everybody to Chapter 19's virtual meeting here on September 18th, 2020. This meeting is being recorded for our awards that we do get at the end of the year for having our monthly meetings and attendance. So appreciate everybody's joining in. And then currently we're supposed to have 42 individuals on the call. Hopefully at the end we'll have all of them. So first, I'd like to introduce our new ASPE board. I'm President John Smith from the Lawrence Group Projects here in St. Louis. Everett Meyer, CPE, First Vice President McCarthy.
Good morning.
Morning, Everett.
Morning.
Morning, Everett. Second Vice President Mary Rotter, Golderman Sable, and new mom.
Yay.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mary. Cindy Walker, secretary, semi-retired, still working Golderman Sable, I guess part-time and stuff. Don't know if Cindy's on via phone or not, but I know it's probably not visual. Cindy is our secretary and does a great job pulling together our awards from last year. So thanks, Cindy. Jim Stukenberg is our treasurer. He is retired doing a home project, so I don't know if Jim made it on the call or not. He's been a long-time treasurer for our group for a long time. Our directors, there's Fred Waltrip. He's a fellow CPE. He's a business development with Clay Pipe Systems. Fred, are you on? Not on yet. Oh boy. Well, he's got a speaking part coming up. He'll be on, I'm sure. Diane Rink from Perrick.
Morning.
Show her that great face.
I'm trying to find her here. There she is.
I'm actually live now.
There you go. There she is.
Morning, Diane. Thank you. Then we have Jason Emmerich, the master of the controls right now from Hallmark Stone, and also our 2020 Estimator of the Year awardee. So,
Hey.
Sorry, I'm trying to let people in at the same time here. So,
oh,
Very,
okay.
all right, here. Keep on going.
I know, we know who you are.
I'm not important.
Jeff Judge, CE Gerald. Jeff is a director also. I don't know if Jeff's on the horn or not right now, but get him being there. Cameron Beatty, Holland Construction Services. Cameron, you out there?
He is here. There we go.
The hockey man. Then Kyle Hofeld from Bazan Painting.
Morning.
Good morning. Be careful driving. Appreciate all the board members for this year. We have a very robust year coming up with this COVID-19, so it's going to be a difficult year for us to make sure that we have continuity in our chapter and growth in our chapter, and also meeting our educational requirements for the chapter. Getting into our chapter awards from last year real quickly. The estimator of the year was Jason Emmerich for our chapter. Jason, again, I keep saying, is our controller right now. So he's the guy that has the mic in his hand and the camera in his hand and a mouse in his hand. So he's got a full boat. This year, our chapter won a national award, which was a silver award for chapter achievement. I have a copy of the thing here, Jason. Do we have that on there?
Chapter achievement, yes.
That photo? If not, I could always pull up the actual award sitting behind me.
Why don't you just grab that award behind you? It might be a little easier at the moment.
Yeah. So when we have our meetings, when we get to these face-to-face meetings, I don't know if anybody can see. Let me know if I need to lower it.
Bring it closer, John.
Okay.
That's not how that's gonna work or not, but
More than that? How's that?
that's much better.
This is our national award. It's a stand-up for a tabletop, and it's a nice award. I was a little shocked. What the heck did I get from national? And opened it up and stood it up on my desk, and everybody's in my office giving me a hard time. So what's that? I said, read it and weep. So I'm very proud of our board from last year, and especially the two people who helped put it together, Cindy and Mary. I want to thank you guys very much because it's a big award for this chapter for this year. So thank you very much. Is Frank Kubelik on the call?
If he is, he just called in. I don't see
Okay.
him.
Either way, Frank is a longtime, one of the founding members of our chapter. Him and Fred and Catherine Taylor Yank is the three fellows we have in our chapter, which is fairly good considering there's, I think, 28 in the whole nation, and we've got three of them right here. Frank won a national award from the president this year at our summit, which was a virtual summit. It was a surprise to everybody, including me. I did not know, and I was very proud to get this award for Frank because he's been. I've known Frank since 1989, and he's been a father to me along with Fred. Excuse me. The big thing about this is this is his second time of getting an award like this from the national president. It's at the president's discretion. He got one back when Paulette was president back in the 90s. So he's been around a while in this area. So if Frank's on the phone, I do want to appreciate him again and give him a round of applause. So my next guest speaker is Fred Waldrop. He's supposed to be talking about the chair, and I don't know if he's on the phone or not.
If he is, he's under a phone number, but I don't see him. So.
He was supposed to be joining, so I'll skip him and we'll get into the program and I'll find out where he's at. Chapter 19 membership. I'm the chairman of the Chapter 19 membership. Fred Waldrop is the chair of the certification, just so people know if they are looking for that. As of today, we have 39 members, which is really great. We've grown from 16 to 19s when I first started 3 years ago to 39, and it's not attributed to me as much as it is to our staff. We have 6 students, which 5 of those were from awardees last year. So you want to take 6 students off, we still got 33 active members. There's 3 affiliates. There's 19 estimators. There's 8 certified professional estimators, and there's 3 fellows. So that makes up our 39, and we appreciate the effort that everybody's doing. I'd still like to see our chapter continue to grow. I don't expect it to grow tremendously, but with this virtual meetings that we do have, I feel like we will be able to grow 5 to 10% because it's something that you don't have to leave your house, right? You don't have to leave your job. You can join, just shut your door, mute your phone, and you can join a meeting, which is important for everybody's education because these count towards our CPE credits. So I would like to ask everybody here, especially new people that are members and not members, to try to join our next meeting and bring someone new to the meeting. I think our maximum limit on our Zoom account, Jason, am I correct? Is it what? 100?
I actually don't know the number, so I'm not going to claim
We can get up to 251 people on a go-to, so we'll figure that out when we get there. Hopefully that. Anyway, nationally, if you want to become a member, you can do it on your own. It's real simple, but if you got questions, you can shoot it to me. Individual memberships for estimators is $295 a year. The affiliate members is $295 a year. Everybody gets the same opportunity to join and get the benefits of the chapter society and everything with those memberships. The students are 30. That's a little bit limited on what they can do, but that means that, you know, they at least a member. And then I have the website, which will have Jason can post it, and also I can send it out to anybody for the our website, our chapters meeting notices and everything along with our national. So corporate memberships are a big part of our national growth. So we have platinum at $8,500 a year, gold at $6,000, and silver at $4,250. That's not $42.50, that's $4,200. So But those are just things that I wanted to point out about our membership. And then getting into the program here, the housekeeping items, I'd like to please keep your questions limited to like one each time. Give other people opportunity to ask questions. If you can, send your questions via chat to Jason and to Todd. That way they can see your questions, or Jason, if you can handle those and then ask Todd the question. Since you're in control, you let me know what's best, and then try to raise your hand and Jason will unmute you if you need to ask a question specifically, okay? Anyway, we'd like to get into the program. The program today is on scopes of work and what subs like and dislike. The program should take 20, 30 minutes, if that, depending on how fast Todd speaks. Todd, you can tell us if you want to try to take a break and have questions during and then continue on. That's your choice. So right now I'd like to have Jason take control and introduce our guest speaker.
Sure. So our guest speaker today is the Director of Pre-Construction over at Alberici Constructors, Constructors. And that is Todd Fisk, and you should see him on your screen here momentarily. And then he has been at Alberici since 2006. Some recent projects he's worked on. You may have heard that St. Louis is very soon, the next 3 years, getting an MLS soccer team. Also worked on the brand new SSM St. Louis University Hospital and BJC Campus Renewal Project, BJC being Barnes-Jewish Hospital here in St. Louis, the biggest hospital in the region. 1.5 billion in healthcare projects over the last 20 years. That's that's a lot. So he knows what he's doing, and he's gonna talk us through the scope of work and best practices. This was a topic that many of you we surveyed and asked what we wanted to hear about, so this was it. So without further ado, can you still see Todd's presentation below, everybody? Okay. And I think you're ready to go.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. Thanks, ASPE, for having me this morning as well. I certainly, you say $1.5 billion worth of healthcare experience. I wrote that down and I thought, boy, that seems like a lot, and I should know a lot more than I do. It seems like I have a lot more wounds than I really do have knowledge. So I don't know what that's worth, but I know, so I reviewed the attendees list, and it was interesting. It was good to see several faces and names that I recognize in the industry. Small GCs, some architects, some designers, some engineers. It's a great swath of the society that we live in. So it's going to be interesting to kind of guide us through this topic of scopes of work. So as I thought about the topic over the past couple years, I thought it would be, or past couple weeks, I should say, I thought it'd be prudent to discuss really the global picture of scopes of work living within the procurement process. Let's see here, my bad. There we go. So scopes of work, what are scopes of work? As a guiding principle, I think of them being how we define what a trade partner's contract will consist of. Several subcontractors that are on the line today know that I harp on the process of procurement and making sure that they read the scopes of work that we as GCs define. It's what we use as the agreement for the subcontractors. It's the CMGC's communication tool. It's imperative that we get it right so that everyone, including the subcontractors that we bring on board, are successful. So before diving into scopes, I wanted to back up just a smidge and talk about bid packages. The term bid packages was a little bit new to me, and coming to Alberici, and really what bid packages relates to is the packages that go out to the street, to the community, of which encompass the variety of scopes of work that subcontractors are bidding to. Of course, architects, for a variety of reasons, might be delivering a site work package, a structural package, a core and shell package, a fit out package for a variety of reasons, one of which would be the scheduling constraints of the process, of the pre-construction process. We tend to, as estimators, as much as we try to get to these fancy software processes, we end up relying on Excel for a variety of reasons. One of which is it's a great tool to be able to communicate. And as you can kind of see on the screen here, I put together a quick kind of a schedule, pre-construction schedule, a buyout schedule for a small fit out that I was working on. And what I was trying to do was communicate to the designers and the owners when we needed to go out to bid for a variety of the packages that were coming up. And through that process, we realized that we needed to go out and buy some really early scopes off of 50% CDs. And then we could buy another 95% CDs, and then finally get everything procured off the permit set. Of course, the owner in this scenario was thinking that they'd draw everything and put everything out to the street on 100% CDs, of which we were going to get those on April 26th and then start construction on May 23rd, which everyone on this phone call knows that that's not going to work, right? So thinking along those multiple packages that are going out to the street, there's a couple subcontractors on the line that I know lived through a particular project for a large healthcare entity locally. It was a $1 billion program that we were working on and had multiple phases, multiple projects within the larger project. And at the end of the day, we had written around just south of 200 individual subcontract agreements on this project. We had roughly over 20 different packages that we were sending out to the street, of which we had, the 200 different subcontract agreements underneath those. Managing those was a challenge, and making sure that we have an organized process is paramount to being successful. So you'll see here on the screen, this is kind of a snapshot on kind of in the middle or the back end of that process. Going across the top was a timeline on, this is about maybe 20 to 30 fit out scopes that we were going to hit the street on. And you'll see weeks across the top, and then you see a bunch of gray and red bars down there at the bottom. What I was illustrating here was the owner was hoping to include a fit out of 2 floors of a 15-story building in this process while we were going out to the street for the fit out package. And of course, putting the owner's hat on, we'd like to procure that in a competitive environment. That being said, that presents some challenges, especially when you're in the middle of going out to the street, and then you give a bunch of subcontractors an addendum that includes additional fit out scope. That's a challenge. So we need to be thinking about how we're going to manage those multiple packages that are hitting the street. When we're thinking about how we break up the packages, we're also thinking about subcontractor availability, subcontractor capabilities, and how much they can do. We might split the work from a core and shell to fit out package just because the package might be too big for an individual subcontractor to take on, or there might only be one large mechanical contractor or two large mechanical contractors that can do a particular scope. So in order to make sure that there's a variety of bids for the owner, we might break it up into two different fit out and core and shell packages to make sure that we're getting competitive bids. Talked about lead times earlier on as well. So diving into scopes of work, when we are outlining how we are going to procure their work, we try to identify a single entity or person making sure that the job is complete. We want to make sure that all coordination is accomplished between all scopes. We're looking at providing delineation of scopes to make sure that we have continuity between the different trade partners. The scope can be developed prior to bidding of the work or post-bid. The desire is really to put the work in prior to bidding to make sure that scopes are organized and represent how we, the CMGC, want to build the work. Ideally, we want to develop them prior to bid, which allows for a smooth post-bid review process. Through this effort, we focus on how to communicate, how we intend to build a job. Is there any phasing that needs to be described? And then, of course, we like to think that all subcontractors bidding the scopes, however, we know that we aren't perfect and we make mistakes. We like to be perfect, but certainly we're not, as well as subcontractors make mistakes. We need to be thinking about, in this process, how subcontractors are going to bid the work. I'm thinking about an elevator subcontractor. Those in the industry know that there's only a handful or less elevator manufacturers that can bid work, that have availability to do work. And in that, if you think about how an elevator subcontractor bids work, they have the standard kit of parts that can be very different between manufacturers. A custom elevator, if you must go outside of a standard kit, becomes very expensive. Just slight adjustments from their standard box can add tremendous cost. And it might be $50,000 to $100,000 per elevator if you push that elevator manufacturer into a box and create them an environment that they have to create a specialty type of elevator. And that's not good for the owner. So we want to figure out what's the best way to manage that process so that there's success across all parties. So general layout of the scope of work, getting into the scope of work. We've done a variety of kind of revisions on our scope of work templates at Alberici. I know I see McCarthy on the list. I've seen Perrick. I know Lawrence Group Projects does scopes of work. Everybody does them a little bit differently. And what I've learned is it's really just a communication tool. We're trying to communicate to the subcontractors that are bidding the work. We're defining the scope of work that we want them to bid. So we've taken a general layout of that scope of work, and it goes, we include specifications, general items applicable to all trades, scope-specific inclusions, and then we go into means and methods, and then maybe any quantities that we may desire to get from the subcontractors. So I just kind of provided a general concrete scope of work for us to kind of maybe highlight a few items that we consider when we're looking at this. In this section, I'm showing the delineation of scope. I'm highlighting work that I expect the trade partner to include in their bid. I try to make sure that I highlight items that might be difficult to find in the documents. Hoisting is an item that we want to typically define who's responsible for. Relating to concrete, who's responsible for the vapor barrier? Who's responsible for the horizontal insulation? Is there blindside vapor barrier identified in the documents that is underneath the slab on grade? That's a unique item that if we find it, we may want to try to highlight that for the subcontractor to know, hey, this might add cost to your bid, make sure you include it. What we're trying to do is create a level playing field for all subcontractors to be successful. Who's responsible for caulking? We like to define caulking as similar to similar or similar to dissimilar materials. In that environment, if you think about it'd be really easy for us as the CMGC to define all trade partners have caulking of their own systems and caulking of the perimeter of their systems. But if you think about that, if that's how we procure the work, we're probably going to have some double up of scope. So the challenge to the CMGC is making sure that we eliminate that double up, but have all of the holes picked up. I see a trend in the flat work scopes, wanting to finish concrete without the dowels, where there might be a masonry wall, and come back later and epoxy the dowels in later. When that occurs, does it still make sense for the flat work subcontractor to do this? Seems to me that it might make more sense to have the CMU subcontractor lay out their walls and drill and epoxy their own dowels into them. If there's exterior blockouts, do we typically know that the exterior blockouts are figured out when we're bidding the flat work? Probably not. We may want to have the subcontractor include an allowance for blockouts. If we do that, we got to think about, okay, who's going to grout in those blockouts on the back side of that? Certainly in recent years, we're paying a lot of attention on finishing requirements of slabs and the requirements of cure and seal, whether or not we're going to burn that slab in real tight, or we're going to barely finish that slab and come in later and do maybe some moisture mitigation methods. How often are MEP pads defined when you bid out flat work? I know for us, they're never defined. And I know that I can't make my MEP subcontractor pick up their own mechanical pads, because that just doesn't make sense, because they don't pour their own pads and they're going to have to hire that out anyway. So why don't we include an allowance for pads unshown and figure out in the future and make sure that we have a whole bid for everybody? Transitioning to site work at the loading dock, who's responsible for doing the ramps and stairs? There tends to be some overlap or scope gap when you are looking at the transitioning. If you're bidding out a site concrete package separate from a building flat work package, it's at that loading dock that you typically see some maybe gaps or overlaps. We need to define who's responsible for that loading dock, ramps, and stairs. Moving to drill piers, who's responsible for pumping of groundwater? How's the team, the owner and GC and subcontractors going to manage that risk of drilling rock? I think of there's an individual that used to be working at Alberici and then joined Lawrence Group a while back, and he had a method of making sure that we're always doing pre-drilling pier holes, and making sure that we take out that risk and identify that risk on the owner's side to make sure that the subcontractor knows exactly the elevation of rock for every single pier. Does that add cost? Probably. Is it an effective way of managing risk? Sometimes, I think so. Thinking about stained concrete, do we want to pour that early and protect it, or is there opportunity to block it out if it's in an open area and pour it later with finishes? How's the team want to mitigate risk for inclement weather conditions? If we're going to have the subcontractor responsible, we certainly want to make sure that we define what they are responsible for. And then lastly, as part of the layout and kind of what our scopes of work tend to look like, we request quantities from the subcontractors to include in their bid. We want to make sure that they understand that in providing these quantities, it's strictly for the review process and comparison of their bid to others. And we remind them continually, we want to bring on subcontractors that are going to be successful. We want to bring on subcontractors that are going to be successful. That's very important. So in doing so, transitioning to operations involvement, this chart kind of gives you a glimpse into how we created outlining the roles and responsibilities with timelines on procurement for a recent hospital that we did. What's important to note in this was there was in-depth operations involvement in the development of the scopes of work. They were intimately involved and made this process very successful. We identified all of the tasks associated with that process, and we assigned a responsibility to each of those tasks. I've also found it to be valuable to create a scope matrix. You'll see the chart there on the right, which is an eye strain, of course. But what we're doing is we're identifying all of the spec sections on the left, and then identifying any additional items underneath those individual spec sections and making sure that we identify all work going down the left side of the column. And then across the top, we're assigning responsibility to the individual subcontractors that we intend to award the work to. So it's basically a matrix of how we are going to buy the work. This has been a very fruitful process for us, making sure that we pick up all of the little individual items of work, especially when we have a multi-phased or multi-bid package process when we're developing the scopes. And then certainly, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I might be coming in on the back end. I might not have estimated the project 12 times through the pre-construction process, and I'm just coming in to lead the procurement process. And in so, I don't have an intimate knowledge of the plans. So it's imperative that I review the plans. It's imperative that the project managers that are helping with the buyout review the plans, review the specs. I've seen a tendency to rush to get the package out the door and not have a thorough review. And then we need to make sure that we have a means and methods identified in the scope documents, define how we want to build the work. So then I want to highlight some scope coordination points when developing the scopes of work. I know certainly I've been on several tri-ventures and joint ventures throughout my career, and identifying best practices from different individuals is great. And in doing so, I just wanted to maybe highlight some of the lessons learned that I've seen. So if you're doing core and shell and versus fit out, how are we going to describe the delineation between the different packages, particularly when it comes to MEP systems? Are the documents going to assist us in that process? Cleanup. Recently, so I know that a clean job is a safe job, and we all want all subcontractors to go home safely at the end of the day. In doing so, we want to create a safe environment for them to work in. How do we do that? Well, on a big job, we might have 20 laborers out on the job site cleaning. Well, if we threw that in our CMGC GCs as a line item, I think that probably would be unpalatable to the owner to understand really what the true cost is of that cleanup. So how do we do that a little bit differently? Well, recently we've identified to the subcontractor trade partners, hey, we want you to include one person doing full-time cleanup per 10 individuals that you're going to have on site. Why do we do that? Well, we want to make sure that when the bidding subcontractors have a level playing field. So that's one way to make sure that everybody has a level playing field. Steel, oh boy. As a CMGC, we'd like to procure steel all at once. The structural, the stairs, the decking, the miscellaneous, all in one package. However, we know that the design and the construction schedule typically requires an early procurement of the structural steel package. What does that do? Well, that leaves us needing to procure all of the miscellaneous weird steel elements in miscellaneous steel package. I know that I've been on several projects where it's a challenge getting bidders to even look at a miscellaneous steel package. So what do I do to try to mitigate that process? I try to identify exactly what it is that I want them to bid. Otherwise, they're not going to bid. Again, I'm trying to create a process that creates success for everyone. So what are some other scope delineations? AVB. AVB was one that kind of came to mind. As a general contractor, we're trying to mitigate risk. And one way is to mitigate that risk and push it down to the subcontractors. We want to have one person responsible for that air tightness and vapor tightness of the building. So we'd like to have one person responsible for that AVB. We'd also like to have responsibility of whoever's puncturing that AVB with screws or attachments be responsible for installing that AVB. The reality is a lot of times we might have a mason and a metal panel contractor on board doing attachments into the AVB system. So how are we going to manage that when there's multiple trade partners maybe doing AVB? Caulking. Certainly, we talked about that, and it's always something that we try to make sure that we're very deliberate on who's got what caulking. ICU doors. Thinking about ICU doors, the architect's going to specify an ICU door. Well, it's our responsibility to go out and buy that. If we go out and buy an ICU door, we're going to make sure that someone has the glass, someone has the hardware, and we're going to want to make sure that there's a sole responsibility of everything in that to make sure that there's warranty issues comprised of one individual. Doors, frames, and hardware. We'd like to have one sole responsibility of furnish and install, but sometimes that's not always achievable. So there's a lot of coordination that needs to occur if we separate the furnishing and installation separately. Retaining walls and earthwork and site work. Thinking about how we manage the excavation and backfilling process. Recently was on a large project, and we were complacent on thinking about how the subcontractor that was doing deep underground in our building footprint, what they were backfilling their trenches with. So they were going in, doing all their deep underground, and they were backfilling with clean rock, which was per spec. The reality was we were going to come in and we were planning on neat cutting all of the the tie beams between all the drilled piers. Well, if you think about that, there's a lot of sloughing, and it ended up being kind of an added cost for us in the foundations, trying to manage all of the sloughing off of digging those no longer as a neat cut, but we had to form some of those foundation elements. And then electrical, thinking about as it relates to, you know, our MEP trade partners, they don't like to dig their own trenches. So sometimes we got to dig their trenches for them. And in doing so, thinking about all of the utilities that we end up bumping into can be certainly a challenge. And who's managing that risk? We need to identify who's going to manage that risk. Who's the right person to hold that risk? And in this process, I think that that's the biggest element that we need to, as professionals, is identifying the risk and assigning that risk to someone in a very clear delineation. So I'd like to thank you guys for giving me a few minutes to talk about this this morning. And I'd open it up to questions at this point in time.
John, you want to go ahead? It looks like you typed out a question here, but it looks like we got a good opportunity to ask it. So
Thanks, Jason. I have to look and see what I asked. Hey, Todd, two things, and I'm wanting to ask this. When you're developing the job, do you bring in your lead superintendent who will be assigned a job for some have their historical thoughts and pre-con and helping you visualize stuff from the field aspect?
Yep. You know, yes, we do. It doesn't happen often. It's more typical that the project managers, not the superintendents, are more intimately involved in this process. Where we have questions, you know, they typically have that institutional knowledge of being on site, and we'll go ask the superintendents, or I'll ask the superintendents specific questions as it relates to any superintendent knowledge. Typically, I've seen where it's hard to get a superintendent involved in the procurement process, quite frankly. They'd rather not be in the office, and they'd rather be, quite frankly, out in the field building work. So it's hard to bring them into the office and be integral in this process. How do you guys kind of manage that, John?
In our firm, we don't have the ability to bring in superintendents too often. We got 3 of them.
Right.
We rely on our age here to put it, you know, and when we're talking big scope job, like a, you know, big hospital like that, it's, you know, typically done by, you know, Big Red or McCarthy, somebody like that, you know, because it's, you know, we would be involved through pre-con, but not bring in a superintendent. The other question I had, though, is also the MEP estimators. Do you have them in-house, or do you rely on the MEP design firms to assist you in budgeting phases?
That's a good question. We have some MEP estimators in-house. So it depends on the project, quite frankly. We're going to try to estimate that in-house. However, we don't have a plethora of estimators that we can tap to. So sometimes we got to outsource that either to subcontractors or, you know, a local maybe MEP estimator.
Okay.
I'd pick on, I know that McCarthy's on the phone. You know, I know McCarthy maybe has a different method in doing that. I know McCarthy or maybe Perrick might have a different methodology in doing that. It kind of depends on the work that the individual GCs are doing and how much that MEP estimating does. I also know, you know, I'm working on a tri-venture with Mortensen, and you know, they do they'll go out and solicit a lot of help from the trade partners in the development of those estimates, more than we would ever think about doing. And it's just a different way of doing it. There's benefits and advantages in doing that, and you just have to recognize those.
Todd, there's a question from Rob Berger that says, do you have good success with asking for quantities, unit prices, and extended cost? How do you decide what buckets of costs to request? This is a new item we will be adding to our bid forms and are expecting some pushback. If too in-depth, I think there will be much more pushback.
Yep. Your intuition is spot on. So we quite frankly, this is something that I got from Clayco when I was on a project with them in a tri-venture. And they had been requesting a lot of unit pricing and with their biddings. And so, I tried to adopt that slowly. I realized that it's hard from an estimating standpoint to fill that out completely. I make sure that the subcontractors know that, I'm not looking for everything. I realize that not all of the buckets are gonna add up to the bid price, and I make sure that they understand that. So that's one way to kind of help the subcontractors. I try to help them understand that, I'm not looking, if you can't fill it all out, fill out some of it. Realize that, I'm using this information to make sure that whoever is the apparent low bidder is a successful low bidder. So if they've got, it's in their best interest to provide me as much information as they can, it reasonably can, so that if they've got a scope gap, I can try to identify that and help make sure that, maybe in the post-bid review process, I ask a question. Hey, it seems like you have maybe a lower amount of labor hours identified. Why is that? And they may respond, well, we're doing a lot of prefab. Oh, okay, perfect. That makes sense.
I don't see any other questions. Does anybody have any questions? You definitely.
I have a quick question, Todd. How do you handle like RFIs or requests for substitutions, something that maybe isn't explicitly specified, or maybe a like product? How do you guys handle that?
Great question. It's going to depend on the project, quite frankly, and the owner. More specifically, the owner and the contract agreement that we're going to have with the owner. And the reason I preface it that way is that we, in certain circumstances, we're going to shy away from providing alternative solutions to what the specifications identify. And the reason is if we say, hey, this is an as equal product or substitution, it provides some risk on us in doing so. So where we don't have a great long-standing relationship with maybe an owner and feel comfortable providing that type of service, or we know that the owner is not going to come back and sue us because we maybe provided an alternative solution and they didn't like it at the end of the day, we're going to certainly go through that process. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers my question. And then secondfold, I wouldn't say that this is limited to any one general contractor or any one project, but in the case where as a subcontractor, I'm looking at the specifications, which say A, and then the plans, which say Z, as a subcontractor, how do we proceed?
Well, I've never seen where there's conflicts between the specifications and the plans. So
Water
So that's always a challenge. You know, to the best of our abilities, we try to identify that early. You know, if you're in the subcontractor world, certainly bring it up as an RFI, and we try to identify it to the designers and try to get it resolved so that we get the documents in the best shape as we possibly can before we get numbers. That's the ideal situation. Realizing that a lot of that stuff happens post-bid, and when it does, we're just taking those clarifications and moving forward to the owner and identifying to the owner, hey, your plans say one thing, the specs say another. We'd like to make an award recommendation to XYZ subcontractor with these particular qualifications.
Got it. That makes sense.
Don't see any further questions on the chat. Should we?
Todd, this is Kevin Suter, Murphy Company. I had a quick question. What's your, I guess, opinion on scope letters? We constantly have an ongoing discussion on, do we send in a 18-page scope letter with very detailed, this is what's in, this is what's out, or do we send in a one-page scope letter that says, per plans and specs, here's our number? Just kind of wonder what your, I guess, opinion was on that.
Yes. Both. No. You know, that's a good question. I think we always have internal battles on how to deal with that as well. You know, I'll back up a second and I'll pick on the elevator subcontractor as an example. If you're a GC and you've ever seen an elevator subcontractor quote, it's ridiculous, the amount of qualifications that they identify and how they don't necessarily match with the specifications and plans, and you have to deal with that after the fact. It's a pain in the butt. However, it's a necessary evil. So that's kind of the far end of the spectrum. Coming to a mechanical contractor, we like to try to, where we can, we like to use our scope letter as the defining principle on that subcontract agreement. So in my head, I'm using that scope letter that I've developed as your basis for the subcontract agreement. Then, as long as you're okay with that, I appreciate you providing a scope letter that is in conjunction with my delineation to make sure that I'm not picking up, or I need to pick up something else that you are further identifying, or if there's any other further delineations that need to be expressed or compared to other subcontractors. That's where it really comes into play, is being able to manage that with an analysis between different subcontractors.
Good.
Mr. Myers?
Yes.
You're just as big as me. You have any comments?
I mean, we do it a little bit different, but you know, that's contractor to contractor. On the estimating side, we do have a MEP department, which I'm part of that. So our pre-con department is sort of split in two, with the pre-con directors and the MEP department. So we do in-house estimate. We have 3 electrical and 3 mechanical. So we review most of the bids that come in, and we struggle also with a detailed scope letter versus, hey, it's per plans and specs. Mm-hmm. But we also look at it, is the job a design build, or is it a plan spec job? Sure. If it's a plan spec job, we don't want 18 pages of scope letter. We want you to, like you said, tell us what's your proposal is different from your competitors, what you included and what you didn't include. We don't want you, if it's on the drawings, you're going to have it, put it that way, for a plan spec job. if it's a design build, then yes, identifying quantities is a big factor, because then we can compare that to across the board to everyone. And if somebody's got 10 and somebody's got 8, we got to make that internal decision, who's right and who's wrong. So,
Thanks.
Hey, John, there's Freddie. He's coming in. So,
Yeah, I was going to tell you to unmute him after the program. I wanted to introduce him. So we have all the questions in.
none on the chat. Anybody else have any questions out there? Hearing none, I'll turn it back over to John, and we want to thank Todd. It was a great presentation. It was very informative. Thank you very much. I'll do.
Thank you.
Todd, thank you very much. Want to just touch base a little bit on the, if you have any questions and you want to have those answered, go ahead and email myself at john.smith@thelawrencegroup.com. Jason, if you want to put that on the, anything, that you can send out, I'll be glad to take questions and then forward them on to Todd. Some people have asked about the program PowerPoint. Todd, do you have a problem if we can ship this out to your competitors in this world, or at least get it out to where there are people that see what you're talking about? It is hard to read. I have a hard copy, but at least it gives them some ideas.
Yeah, I can do that. I can send you what I sent last night is maybe updated, so I'll send you a new PDF.
Okay. Yeah. Appreciate that very much.
Sure.
Other than that, Fred's on the phone or Zoom.
No, I'm on the computer now. I just got it in the office, John. I've been listening to his all morning.
Well, good. Everybody, I'd like to introduce Fred Waltrip. He's a fellow CPE, and he is our certification chair, and he would like to speak about certification of our members that are estimators. So, Fred, take it away.
Okay. Again, ASPE has a certification program. I have been in for probably 40 years, and it now with today. Used to, and years ago, you could only sign up for it once a year, but you can sign up for it anytime you want now and start the process. Again, you've got to do some essay, and you've got to do some qualifications. You've got to be an estimator for a limit of 5 years. They have an associate program that Jason's hopefully is going to be taking the test or following through with it here soon, and to get your first step out of the way. And then when you go for your CPE, you've got 2 steps of testing. You got to do the general conditions, and then you've got to do your Pacific division testing and to be qualified. So it's a good program, and there is some studying. And in the front ends are for the mechanicals, electrical and subcontractors. The front ends is a little bit tougher because we don't do the everyday stuff that the general contractors do. So it does take a little bit more coaching with the subs to get them through it to make sure they pass it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Fred. Wanted to thank Todd, and also Todd, I will get you a gift card, either I'll get it delivered or mailed over to your office for this presentation. We do appreciate your time and effort. So you can take your bride out for a night out, wherever that may be. So
yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Not necessary.
In closing announcements, we have chapter meetings, and just to make it easy for everybody, on the 3rd Friday of the month at 7 o'clock or 7:30, it depends on the speaker, Jason, we're not early birds like some of them. We'll have the September 18th meeting today, October 16th, November 20th, which is my 67th birthday. And
What?
then, yeah, 67 because I'm retiring. I will retire pretty soon here. January 15th, February 19th, March 19th, April 16th, and May 21st. It's the third Friday. We did skip December because we'd like to take off for Christmas. So just keep that in mind. So it's September through May, the third Friday of the month. And again, I'm asking, the program will be starting at 7 or 7:30, depending on our guest speaker and our dates. So we do have a website. It's www.aspe19, the numbers, stlouis.org. Jason, if you could pull that up in case people want to screenshot it.
Should be able to see it now.
Okay. And the meeting locations, if we do get back to face-to-face, currently would be held at the AGC's office at the moment, but since we're in COVID, we're Zooming it. So I do want to request everybody look at the trivia night and circle that date on your calendar for March 13th of 2021 at 6 o'clock. We had our trivia night last year before COVID really kicked in. We raised sufficient money to where we had 5 scholarships given out last year to members. The students that are on there, the 5 of the 6 are from last year. Like to make sure that we continue to donate to the universities and college students who need the funds to help pay for the college that are coming into the construction industry in some form or fashion. Again, I'd like to try to figure out how to do this virtually. There's a one that's in my town tonight from the Rotary Club. So I'm going to see if I can find out how they're handling the trivia night on virtual. I will go ahead and take care of finding that out. The other thing is we're planning on having an estimating academy. Our current one was postponed, yet we're preparing for a fall of 2021 to have an in-person one, unless we cannot get past this COVID stuff, and we'll deal with that at that time. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending. And Todd, I do want to again thank you for your presentation of a great topic. The next meeting is on October 16th. The topic for that one will be pre-construction and estimating in an era of the COVID pandemic. The chair for that is Everett Meyer. So anybody that can help Everett in that endeavor to pull that together, we would appreciate it. Other than that, I am done, and I do appreciate everybody joining, and hopefully to see more of your faces next month or in between. If you have any questions, please email me at john.smith@thelawrencegroup.com, and I will help in any way. Anybody else have any questions? Other than that, I do appreciate your attendance and enjoy the day and get out and enjoy the weather. I think it's supposed to be nice out. So thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
John.
Bye now.
You.
Have a good day.